Breaking news, we're getting the first results on this election night. Key races in 3 states are testing President Trump's support and impeachment politics just ahead of the vote in 2020. Our chief national correspondent and Inside Politics anchor, John King, is joining us at the Magic Wall. John, I understand we have some early results coming in from Kentucky.
We do, Wolf. Kentucky and Mississippi, the 2 big governor's races we're watching tonight, mostly to test the Republicans' turnout in what are traditionally red states. You look at Kentucky here, I want to make clear, voters over here in the western part of the state, central time zone, the polls are still open to the top of the hour. So we encourage those people to vote. Whoever you're going to vote for, get out and vote. We wouldn't talk much about what we know so far, except to say it's a very competitive race. So we have no reluctance talking about what we look at the moment. Matt Bevin is the Republican incumbent governor. He's seeking a new term. President Trump was down for the big rally last night. He's trailing right now in the early returns. Andy Beshear, the Democratic state attorney general, also the son of a former Democratic governor, so a well-known name in the state. This was a competitive race throughout, and the very early results, 2% just in, show that you have a very competitive race. So what are we looking for? Both in the case of Governor Bevin and Republican turnout, or Mr. Beshear and Democratic performance, and then we carry over maybe a lesson into 2020. You look in the urban areas. We have nothing in from Louisville yet, Jefferson County, the biggest part of the state right there. But you look at the suburbs around it, right? We've watched this in the 2018 elections. President Trump has hurt his party in the suburbs. So does he hurt Matt Bevin tonight in suburbs across Kentucky? One way to look at this, Wolf, not much you can tell from this early map, especially when the percentages are so low. We go back in time, and you see Governor Bevin ran very strong up here, ran very strong outside. Think of the blue is think outside that line there, and you see the suburbs around Frankfort, around Lexington. So when we get the results tonight, we'll want to come back and look at this when we come back to tonight's map. Do those lines hold? Does that stay blue, but out here stays red? These are blue early on. If they stay blue, you might see some Republican struggles in the suburbs. Very early now, don't draw any conclusions. But that's one of the things we'll watch for. Number one, to see if Governor Bevin has a suburban problem like President Trump and the Republicans did in 2018, or whether he defies that. And then it's hard to say whether there will be clues and lessons about 2020 here, but that's one of the things we'll be studying as we go through Kentucky and then later on tonight, Mississippi.
We're going to be watching these races throughout the night and updating our viewers. John King, thanks so much for that. Right now, let's get back to the breaking news. From newly revealed testimony in the impeachment investigation, a key diplomat and Trump ally changing his sworn statement to Congress and now admitting to a Ukraine quid pro quo. Let's bring in our experts to break down what we've learned from these transcripts. And Gloria, in his updated, revised statement, Sondland writes, "I now do recall a conversation on September 1st with one of Ukrainian President Zelensky's top aides." Sondland says this: "I said that resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks." So how significant is all of this?
Well, it's quite significant because this is somebody who is in direct contact with the Ukrainians and also who is in direct contact with the President of the United States. And throughout this process, there are lots of people, including someone who said, you know, we were told to look into Burisma, but we didn't know that Burisma equaled Biden. Eventually, he came to understand, of course, that it did, and a lot earlier than we thought, because on September 1, he had that discussion with a top advisor to Zelensky and told him that. And so I think that now we know this is somebody who was involved in this from the entire way. And what was interesting in his testimony was that he said at a certain point, the timeline kept getting more insidious as the timeline went on. And back in July, it was just about corruption. So you can see the progression here from someone who believed it was just about getting to the bottom of corruption in Ukraine and a general statement would be fine, to somebody who came to believe, of course, that it was something much more political.
You know, Jeffrey, he submitted this revised statement to his sworn testimony only yesterday. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the implicit question is that is this a defense against perjury? And as a technical legal matter, you know, an intentional false statement is a crime regardless if you correct it. However, no prosecutor is going to bring a case where a witness comes forward voluntarily and says, you know, I remembered something after all. I just think, as a practical matter, there is no way Sondland is going to be charged for making a false statement originally, even if it could be established that he lied at first But I think, you know, he is in the clear.
Yeah, I'm sure his lawyers told him, you know, you better revise the statement before it's too late. You know, David Swerdlik, Sondland testified, this is very specific, that he assumed it was illegal for Rudy Giuliani to push Ukraine to investigate the Bidens, but he's the one who actually delivered that message to the Ukrainians. That doesn't necessarily add up.
No, it doesn't add up, certainly from the point of view of if you're thinking all along, like, well, I'm not a lawyer, maybe this is illegal, but I don't really want to know for sure if it's illegal because I want to plow ahead with whatever the game plan is, then you match that up with the fact that, okay, Ambassador Taylor testified on September 1st that his understanding was that Ambassador Sondland did know what was going on, and then on September 9th, Ambassador Sondland sent that text where he said POTUS really wants the deliverable. It not sort of wants, really wants it. So then the question is, in that intervening time frame, was he ever thinking, if this might be illegal to be involved in any part of this, why would you consider continue to go ahead with your role in it?
It's interesting, Kylie, because Sondland also testified that the State Department and the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, were aware of Rudy Giuliani's actions when it came to Ukraine, but were boxed in. They were boxed in, he says, because of Giuliani's special relationship with President Trump.
Yeah, so at one point, Ambassador Sondland describes a conversation that he had with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and they're discussing Giuliani in broad terms, he said. And at that point, Secretary of State Pompeo rolls his eyes and says, this is something essentially that we just have to deal with. We have to live with it. We have to involve Giuliani because President Trump had told Sondland, had told Volker that they need to deal with Giuliani. So as you said, they were kind of dealing with him because they didn't think that they had any other option. But the key here is that, as we've noted, the requests, the pressure from Giuliani grew more and more insidious. And that is from this testimony from Sondland himself, who said initially it was just about, you know, corruption in Ukraine. And then it became pushing for this investigation into Biden and 2016. And even at that point, the Secretary of State and those who were in charge and those who could have said something to President Trump, we have no evidence that they tried to put up any guardrails between Giuliani and the formal U.S. policy.
And don't forget, it also involved the trashing of an American diplomat who was rushed home because they didn't like her there because she wasn't with the program.
Right. You know, it's interesting, Jeffrey, because Ambassador Sondland, a major political donor to the inauguration, gave $1 million, got this plum assignment, ambassador to the European Union. Pretty damning testimony, revised statement that was released today. Is it going to make much of a difference from your perspective?
Well, I mean, the thing about this story is that there's only one story. I mean, there's no ambiguous evidence in this story. Everything that has come forward points in the same direction, that the president decreed that Rudy Giuliani was effectively in charge of this policy, and the policy was Ukraine doesn't get the money until and unless they agree to investigate Joe Biden's son and the 2016 election. Now, you can pretend that's not the evidence, and if you're loyal to the president, as many Republicans are, you can invent arguments that either it didn't happen or it's not serious enough for impeachment. But in terms of the facts, I just don't think there's any ambiguity here about what happened.
You know, I think that Republicans are doing exactly what Jeffrey said, which is they are going to say, well, okay, maybe there was a quid pro quo, and it may have been inappropriate, but certainly not impeachable. And that's the argument you're going to hear more and more, because the facts are the facts. And we have Gordon Sondland talking about it. We have other diplomats talking about it. It can't be that they're all wrong. Yeah. They're not. And so what do? You say, well, okay, inappropriate.
And I'm sure federal investigators are looking to Rudy Giuliani because of potential financial deals that he had with various Ukrainians. At the same time, he was engaged in this so-called shadow diplomacy on behalf of the president. Everybody stick around. There's more news we're following. A woman who accuses President Trump of sexual assault now says she has new evidence to back up her claims. There are new questions tonight about the potential legal danger for Rudy Giuliani. Newly disclosed testimony shows a key diplomat assumed Giuliani's shadow campaign in Ukraine was illegal. And now an indicted associate of Giuliani's is in serious talks about cooperating with impeachment investigators. Let's bring in our crime and justice reporter, Shimon Prokopez. Shimon, this Giuliani associate could be the next major player to have a significant role in all of this.
Certainly could be. This person, they've changed attorneys. He has a new attorney. Remember when members of Congress came to him and said, we want information, your relationship with Rudy Giuliani, what you guys were doing, they weren't going to comply. They had sent a letter. John Dowd was representing them at the time. You may remember him. He at one point represented the president during the Mueller investigation. They weren't going to comply. Something has changed, clearly, and now they're saying we are going to give you documents, his attorney. So it's going to be interesting because the key thing, what information is he going to turn over to members of Congress, specifically as it relates to this entire Ukraine situation with Rudy Giuliani.
We're talking about Lev Parnas, who was charged, was indicted recently.
That's right. Recently indicted. There's a big investigation by the Southern District of New York, and I think it truly centers around the removal of the Ukrainian ambassador.
The U.S. ambassador.
The U.S. ambassador to the Ukraine. That is a big component of that investigation. They are in the middle of that investigation. We'll see. We'll see what information they provide to members of Congress. And the other thing that I wonder, is this some kind of signal that perhaps they're trying to send to prosecutors in New York that maybe somewhere down the line they would be willing to cooperate?
Another story I know you were watching today, the longtime Trump associate Roger Stone, his trial is just beginning here in D.C.
It's just beginning, opening statements tomorrow. He had to go home early today. Roger Stone, he wasn't feeling well, so the judge let him go home and they continued jury selection. Tomorrow we should get opening statements, and then perhaps we may even see one of the first witnesses in this case. We don't know who that is, but there are a lot of familiar faces, certainly, that are going to be there. So it's going to get interesting.
He's got a decade's relationship with the president. We'll watch that very closely. Shimon, thank you very much for that. Just ahead, new cell phone records are released in a former apprentice contestant's court battle with President Trump. Does the information back up her allegations of sexual assault? We have breaking news on the horrific attack on an American family in Mexico. New video just into CNN shows a helicopter arriving to evacuate survivors and take them for treatment in the United States. 9 women and children were killed in the ambush near the U.S. border. CNN correspondent Matt Rivers is in Mexico City for us. Matt, what more do we know about this attack on members of a Mormon community?
Yeah, you know, this is an ongoing investigation, Wolf, but what I can tell you is that this has shocked Mexico. There have been almost 30,000 murders this year alone so far, and yet this massacre has just shocked people here in Mexico.
I think a lot of us are just speechless. It's horrific.
Family members in shock after a horrendous attack by suspected criminal groups left 9 people dead, including 3 women and 4 small children and 2 babies. It happened Monday while they were traveling in a caravan through northern Mexico, just south of the border, headed to pick up family for an upcoming wedding.
I just can't believe that this actually happened to our family. It just seems like a bad dream.
Family members tell CNN the group was driving between the Mexican states of Sonora and Chihuahua in a caravan for safety reasons when they were attacked by an armed group, which sprayed the car with bullets and set at least 1 on fire. Mexican government officials say it's unclear whether the attack was targeted or a case of mistaken identity, with the shooters mistaking the families as rival groups. Kendra Lee Miller is the bride at that upcoming wedding. She tells CNN her sister-in-law, Ronita Miller, is among the victims.
Nita was one of the most vibrant, happy souls that I've ever met. She just had so much spark and life in her.
Kendra says Ronita was driving one of the vehicles with 4 of her 7 children to Tucson, Arizona to go shopping for the wedding. 43-year-old Donna Langford and her 2 children were in another vehicle, and 29-year-old Christina Johnson and her 7-month-old son were in a third vehicle. 7 children overall were injured in the attack and are now hospitalized.
None of my grandchildren made it out. It burnt to a crisp. And my daughter-in-law, and they're about as innocent as they come, and I'm not saying it because she's gone, but she was a good mother to those children. They're innocent as the day is long.
The victims are all members of a Mormon community in northern Mexico, not affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, President Trump has said that he has offered U.S. military assistance here, that now is the time for Mexico to wage a war against the drug cartels. But Mexico's president said, thanks for the offer, Wolf, but this is Mexico's responsibility to deal with this.
What a horrendous, horrendous story. Matt Rivers reporting from Mexico. Thank you very much. Just ahead, new evidence in the legal battle between President Trump and the former Apprentice contestant who accuses him of sexual assault. We're learning about new evidence in a legal battle involving the president and a woman who accuses him of sexual assault. Former Apprentice contestant Summer Zervos claims newly public cell phone records corroborate her assault allegations. The phone records are said to show that Mr. Trump spoke with Zervos multiple times in late 2007, early 2008, around the time of the alleged attack. The records were disclosed as part of Zervos' defamation lawsuit against the president filed after he called her a liar. Mr. Trump has repeatedly denied assaulting Zervos. To our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now.
Out front next, breaking news. Turning on Trump, an ally does a 180 and changes his sworn testimony, now admitting there was a quid pro quo with Ukraine. Plus, Democrats calling the president's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, to testify. Will he show up? And it's election night in America. Polls closing in crucial states across the country. John King is here with the very latest at the Magic Wall. Let's go out front. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin, in for Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, a really stunning reversal. The president's ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, suddenly remembering, it appears, there was a quid pro quo with Ukraine. According to his testimony, which he amended just yesterday, Sondland told lawmakers about a conversation he had with a top aide to Ukraine's president, and he puts it this way. I now recall speaking individually with Mr. Yermak, it's a top aide to the Ukraine president, where I said resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks. Withholding aid until Ukraine announced publicly they were going to investigate the Bidens. That is a quid pro quo. And that statement, and who is now saying it, is key. It's coming from the president's hand-picked ambassador, a close ally of the president, a man who had donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration. And he is, with this now addendum to his testimony, blowing through the president's main defense here.
No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo.
So Gordon Sondland now joining the list of officials who also have testified under oath that Donald Trump was withholding, the administration was withholding crucial military aid in exchange for investigations into his political rivals. But Sondland's testimony undercuts Trump's defense in another way, the timing. Sondland's conversation with the Ukrainian official about the quid pro quo took place on September 1st in Warsaw, Poland. That is when Vice President Mike Pence was meeting with Ukraine's president to discuss military aid. Shortly after that high-level meeting, Sondland now testifies that is when he has a sidebar meeting with Zelensky's aide, and that is when he told him directly that the aid was unlikely to unfreeze without the announcement of investigations. In that context, remember this. A major talking point for the president and his allies has been the following. Withholding the money was fine and didn't amount to a quid pro quo because Ukraine didn't know the aid was being withheld.
How do you have a quid pro quo when the person who is the subject of the pro said it didn't happen?
Neither he or any other witness has provided testimony that the Ukrainians were aware that military aid was being withheld. You can't have a quid pro quo with no quo.
Ukrainians never knew that aid had been withheld. And then, of course, maybe most importantly, we have the simple fact that Ukrainians did nothing to get the aid released.
They didn't know the aid was being withheld. We know Trump has tweeted and retweeted this very defense often. But now we hear from Sondland. He said directly that the aid was being withheld, saying that directly to Ukraine. So now what? Caitlin Collins is out front live from the White House. Caitlin, what is the response from the White House to the release of this testimony today.
Well, Kate, we haven't seen President Trump today. He has made no public appearances yet, but we did get a statement from the press secretary long after these transcripts were released, pointing to certain parts of Gordon Sondland and Kurt Volker's testimony, but largely ignoring the fact that Sondland, this ambassador to the European Union, made a massive reversal in his amended testimony that he added there at the end in what was released today. And they have not acknowledged at all the fact that in that amended testimony, he directly tied the investigation into the Bidens to that military aid and the announcement of that investigation. That is something that they just aren't acknowledging, which is pretty noteworthy since you just talked about the fact that that has been one of the president's main defenses here. The question is, going forward, what are they going to say? Because we know they've been watching the release of these transcripts really closely, believing, in fact, that releasing them would in some way help exonerate or redeem the White House, because they thought Democrats were only selectively leaking parts of it that had happened behind closed doors. But now when you read these testimonies in full, you see that there's not a lot of parts that are redeeming for the president so far. At least that's what White House officials are saying. The question is going to be, will they try to distance themselves from Gordon Sondland? It's going to be a pretty difficult task, given the fact that he's someone who donated a lot of money to the president. He was a senior aide in this administration, and of course, a crucial point, he had direct conversations with the president about what was happening here when other officials were raising concerns, which he testified that in one conversation, the president, he said, believed was in a bad mood and didn't hang up on him, but hung up very quickly after he asked the president what it was he wanted from Ukraine.
Yeah. First-hand account and direct access to the president. Those two things we definitely see in this testimony. Great to see you, Caitlin. So thanks so much. Okay, out front tonight with me now is Democratic Congressman Adrian Espaillat. He sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the committees that has been conducting these interviews. And I know, Congressman, you've been sitting in on some of these key interviews as well. What is your reaction then to this addendum to the testimony coming from Sondland, saying in this testimony that he told a top Ukraine official that the aid was not likely to unfreeze, if you will, if they don't make this announcement about investigations?
This could be a smoking gun. And I think that first, for the Republicans, they questioned the process, a process that they were in. And they were in the room questioning the witnesses, including Sondland. Then they went ahead and they questioned our vote. Then, of course, just a couple of days ago, they questioned the whistleblower. I suspect that tomorrow, Kate, they're going to question the addendum to the testimony of Sondland as well.
Do you see this as a smoking gun?
I believe that it's a smoking gun. I think that Sondland is a credible witness. He's someone that has been in communications with the president back and forth. He amended his testimony. I was in the room where he testified before the committees.
That was October 17th.
That's correct. And I questioned him. And then he came back yesterday and he amended his testimony to reflect that, in fact, he did have communications with the Ukrainians.
Why do you
about
think
military
he did that?
aid. Well, I think maybe he's looking at what could happen to him. And he wanted to be as precise and as transparent as possible.
Congressman, do you think then he was lying to you on October 17th, or do you leave open the possibility that, as he wrote in the addendum, the two statements from two other officials refreshed his memory about this encounter in Warsaw, Poland?
Well, I said the day after I was part of that process in the committee that he was either playing dumb or he was lying through his teeth, because many of the things that he was saying back then, some of which he amended now, were really incomprehensible. And I think that he's someone that's in contact with the president. He was in contact with the Ukrainian officials. He knew about Burisma. I think he knew about that Hunter Biden was a member of Burisma, although in the committee hearings he said he didn't find out about that until the very end. This is someone that said that corruption was a major problem in the Ukraine. There's hundreds of companies there that are involved in corruption. Yet they selected one company, Burisma, which is the one where Hunter Biden was affiliated. I think he knew that. I think they cherry-picked that company, and they wanted the Ukrainian government to investigate.
So then what questions do you have for Sondland now? What is your question now to him? I mean, I would assume that he's going to be one of the people that would be called for a public hearing.
Well, we'll leave it to the public hearing. I think that he has lots of questions to answer. I think some of the questions may be what direct connections he had with the president, what communications he had with the president vis-a-vis this conversation with the Ukrainians.
That may or may not be key, because here's one thing that he said in his testimony. Let me read it for you. He said, "I did not know and still do not know when, why, or by whom the aid was suspended." He is not saying that he knows a link. He is saying he does not know where this direction came from that led him to tell this top aide in Ukraine.
This is like who's on first and who's on second. This is
You don't believe this
No,
statement.
I don't believe that. Absolutely not. I think there's credible evidence. I would like to see Taylor testify again publicly. Of course, the lieutenant colonel was very credible as well. And even Volker himself stated that to Rudy Giuliani that the former Ukrainian prosecutor was not credible, that he was not to be trusted. And so there's a lot of testimonies there that lead to the reality that there was a conversation.
So let me ask you this, and let me play for you Mark Meadows. His reaction today when asked about this is, the next defense that Republicans are now saying is that there is no link, as you're mentioning, no link to the president when it comes to a quid pro quo, and so there is nothing there. Listen to this.
Any linkage that has been alleged, obviously, is based on many times second or third-hand information. But I can tell you each and every time that the conversations were conducted with either the President of the United States or the Vice President of the United States, there was no linkage.
No linkage to the president. I mean, so what do you do with that? He's not moving. It's not changing.
Okay, I think the American people will make up their mind. The minds where they hear the public testimony once again from the lieutenant colonel, from Sondland, from Taylor, and all the other witnesses. This is against Mr. Meadows and others saying, first, it was the problem of the process. Mr. Meadows was right there.
But if there is no direct, you don't have someone linking it to the president, do you think that's a problem for you?
We'll see what they say publicly, and you will judge for yourself, as will the American people, whether or not the president has something to do with it. I believe he did.
Congressman, thanks for coming in. An important day, and there's not much more to come. I really appreciate your time. Out front for us next, we have our breaking news continues. Gordon Sondland testifies Rudy Giuliani's push to get Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. He thinks it may have been illegal. Plus, one of Trump's former top experts on Ukraine admits the president is pushing a baseless conspiracy theory, but will that stop the president now? And Joe Biden, with some of his harshest words yet, just coming out this evening harshest words yet for Elizabeth Warren, saying her politics are elitist and condescending. Will it put a dent in Warren's momentum? Breaking news revealed in the transcripts just released. President Trump's hand-picked ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, testifying that he believed efforts by Rudy Giuliani in Ukraine appeared to be illegal. This, as Sondland also revised his testimony just yesterday to say there was a quid pro quo linking aid to Ukraine to announcing investigations into Trump's political rivals. Out front now, former Nixon White House counsel John Dean, CNN senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson, Joe Lockhart, who was press secretary for President Clinton during his impeachment investigation, of course, and former Republican senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum. John, I want to start with you. I mean, you have Sondland pointing this finger at Rudy Giuliani, but I do want to ask first about the big headline tonight, which is that Sondland's now saying that he alerted Ukraine that the aid was unlikely to unfreeze unless they announced investigations. Is it at all plausible that Sondland just remembered this point?
I suppose it's possible. It's certainly an argument he could make now if he is ever charged with perjury. No, not likely would a prosecutor come back after somebody is corrected on that point. But he has so many other flaws in his testimony that I just think this sort of flags the problems with his testimony.
Yeah, I mean, Nia, you have to say one thing about him. This is not someone that the president is going to be able to call a never Trumper, as he has dismissed other witnesses, that's for sure. I mean, is this a game changer in terms of the course of the investigation? We just had a Democratic congressman on who said he sees this as a smoking gun.
You know, and I think a lot of people who are looking at this, particularly Democrats, have seen smoking guns all along the way,
Good
right?
point.
Whether it was the whistleblower testimony, whether it was what came out of Bill Taylor's deposition, Vindman's deposition as well. So this, you know, essentially they're kind of been building blocks, and most of this testimony just corroborating this initial idea that's laid out in the transcript that the president released, or the memo of the phone call, which is that there does seem to be, you know, a favor for a favor or a quid pro quo in terms of what the president is asking Zelensky to do. And so I think Sondland's testimony was always something of a mystery because his testimony seemed to be at odds with a couple of others, Morrison's and Taylor's, for instance. And so now, and he said this, essentially his memory has been refreshed because of the testimony out of some of his colleagues there and putting him, in a place where he couldn't recall, right? His initial testimony, 10 hours or so, was full of he couldn't recall things, and now he is updating it. And so, yeah, I think if you're Democrat, you're happy about this. I think if you're Republican, it's more of the same. Maybe you are even reading the testimony. I think Lindsey Graham basically is saying, oh, he's not really even reading what's coming out of these transcripts from these depositions.
And Senator, I have been curious since this addendum, revised testimony came out, what the reaction would be from Republicans. I mean, first we know that the Republican allies on the Hill had said there was no quid pro quo, mirroring what the president continues to say. Then you have McMulvaney, who blew that defense up. So they moved to it's not a quid pro quo because Ukraine didn't know that any of the aid was held up. They now no longer can say that either with this revised testimony. Is this troubling to you?
I think the way most Republicans see this is, this statement today is just, it may be a smoking gun, but it's a smoking gun from the Keystone Cops. So I don't think anybody sees it as a serious blow to the president. The reality is, I think Republicans see this just on a variety of fronts. Number one, the president has maintained, that there wasn't a quid pro quo, and the transcript backs that up. I think as Republicans read it, I know other people read it differently. The way I read it, and I think the way most Republicans read it, is that the president was not in any way offering a quid pro quo in his conversation, which is what we know the president said, and that's hard fact. Everything else is just people's
honestly,
opinion.
This wasn't about the phone call. This is not about a phone call. This is about a direct statement from a close ally of the president who seemed to, dawned on him that he thinks that it was somehow very important to tell a Ukrainian counterpart that the aid's unlikely to unfreeze unless there is an announcement on investigations on September 1st.
I understand, but I'm saying as Republicans look at this, they're looking at all these second and third hand accounts of what the people thought maybe was being related, or what they thought they should be saying, or what was going on. But the only thing we have from the president himself is the transcript, and that is pretty clear that there is, at least to Republicans, that there's no quid pro quo. And so I'm just saying all this other stuff is just people's opinion as to what the policy of the administration was, or what they believed it should be. I don't know. I think Republicans are waiting to see how all of this conjecture on the parts of all this testimony holds up under cross-examination and scrutiny once their stories, get examined by the White House counsels.
Joe, that gets directly to what I've now heard several times in terms of from Republicans, there's no linkage, there's no direct, my name is Donald Trump and I am telling you to tell Ukraine that they cannot have this aid unless they announce an investigation. The White House statement basically gets to that, but Sondland's statement still says that he doesn't know when and from whom this came to him that he was supposed to direct. I mean, does that give the president wiggle room?
I don't think so. I think one of the reasons why that hasn't been laid out in the specificity that some of the other things is the White House is stonewalling. And they're stonewalling for a reason, because if the committee had access to the documents, they'd understand this. But let's go back to McMulvaney, because I think that is a critical moment in this investigation. He said there was a quid pro quo. He then also said, everything that I did as far as Ukraine, I did at the direction of the president. That is a direct linkage. He admits there's a quid pro quo, and he said, I did it at the direction of the president.
John, let me ask you this. In what universe does Gordon Sondland tell a top official in Ukraine that you're not going to get this money unless you announce an investigation into the Bidens? If he didn't get that directly from the president, or if he's confident that's exactly what the president wanted?
It's not certainly clear from his testimony, because he says in his testimony he had no direct conversations with the president about this, or indeed the fact even that he was the point man on Ukraine. This sort of comes down through the Secretary of State and the National Security Director Bolton at the time, and mysteriously he has all these powers, but he's never had any contact with the president. So he's smart enough to know that he shouldn't be talking about what he does and did not do with the president. And that's exactly one of the gaps in his testimony, is that they're just incomprehensible, that he can do one thing and say he didn't have any direct linkage with the president.
Guys, if you could stand by for me, because out front next we have Democrats. They want to hear from the man, as Joe was just getting to, who said this.
To be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. We do that all the time with foreign policy.
And get over it. So what are the chances that Mick Mulvaney actually shows up now that he's been asked to testify? And the breaking news, election results are coming in from Virginia and Kentucky, and what tonight could say about what could happen next year. Breaking news, Democrats calling on Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney to testify this week as part of the impeachment probe. The same Acting Chief of Staff who held a press conference at the White House, in the White House briefing room, to defend the president, and in doing so said this.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happen as well. We do that all the time with foreign policy. I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy.
He faced so much backlash from even Republicans after that Mulvaney had to walk it back or say that he didn't say what he said. On that, let's go out front. Manu Raju is out front for us now. Manu, we have multiple witnesses this week who have already refused to appear for a variety of reasons. But what is the working assumption here about Mick Mulvaney?
Yeah, we're not expecting him to show up. The White House pushing back on this earlier today in the aftermath of the Democrats' demands for him to come testify later this week. Already there have been 6 witnesses, White House officials this week, who have not shown up despite being faced with subpoenas demanding their appearance. Also, there are 4 additional witnesses coming tomorrow. We expect at least 3 of them not to show up. That includes the Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, as well as the head of the White House Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought. And on Thursday, the big day, John Bolton, the former national security advisor, is scheduled to testify that day. And he, of course, has been mentioned throughout these investigation, with witness after witness describing him as concerned about this push to investigate the Bidens, that urged Ukrainians to announce that investigation as aid for that country. Roughly $400 million had been held up. And then we're not certain whether or not he will come as those discussions continue out behind the scenes. That leaves it to Friday, when Mick Mulvaney has been asked to come. Democrats are not expecting him to come, but one person who might come, Kate, is Jennifer Williams. She is an aide to Mike Pence on his national security team. The questions about Mike Pence's role have continued also to percolate throughout this investigation. We're told that she is likely to appear, so we'll see if she ultimately comes. But at the moment, Kate, closed-door interview witnesses are not showing up as Democrats prepare to use that as evidence, in their view, of obstruction of Congress. Kate?
Thank you so much, Manu. Everyone's back with me now. Nia, can you game this one out for me? I mean, it's clearly unlikely Mulvaney would show up. What do the Democrats get here?
You know, I think, listen, they already have Mick Mulvaney in the White House there. Essentially, what they say is confessing to a quid pro quo. He, of course, backed away from that and said he misspoke or something. So I think the ultimate plan here is, if these folks don't show up, as you saw Manu allude to there, it's essentially this will be one of the articles impeachment, if this is something that the Democrats indeed end up doing, filing articles of impeachment against this president. So obstruction of Congress, contempt of Congress, of course, was one of the 3 articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. I think you have had Democrats here say essentially they're not going to get roped into kind of a court fight with these folks. They want to keep it moving. And if you've seen so far, in some ways, Democrats have probably been pleasantly surprised with people who have cooperated with this inquiry. There are some people who basically ignored some of the directives from the State Department, some of the directives from the White House, too, and followed through with subpoenas. And so in that way, if you're a Democrat, you've got a pretty good pile of evidence. So you go with that, and the evidence you don't get and the witnesses you don't get, that just is rolled into an article of impeachment.
Yeah, I mean, John, the statement from the House Democratic Committee chairs asking Mulvaney to come said this: "We believe that you possess substantial firsthand knowledge and information relevant to the House's impeachment inquiry." I mean, if he did, how big of a deal would this be?
It could be a very big deal. A chief of staff or even acting chief of staff tends to know pretty much everything that's going on in the West Wing and probably would have a lot of details and a lot of information that hasn't even surfaced. But what the committee has to be very cognizant of, what happened back, as Mia mentioned, when Article 3 of the Nixon articles was designed, they had the linkage. They had a linkage problem. They had to show that the president's policy or the president's directives were really his decision that somebody would not appear or somebody would not honor a subpoena. And I don't think they're doing that yet.
Senator, back to the transcripts, because more came out, not just with Gordon Sondland, but with Kurt Volker testimony being released today. He testified that he does not think that Joe Biden did anything wrong by pushing for the ouster of Ukraine's prosecutor a few years ago, which Donald Trump has said over and over again, which has been very clear, has been the basis for him calling for an investigation over there, because it came for corruption, but it really was only about corruption when it came to Joe Biden and his son. Let me read you what Kurt Volker said about this. He said Biden was executing U.S. policy at the time and what was widely understood internationally to be the right policy. With that, how do Republicans continue then to say that Joe Biden deserves being investigated, which is what Donald Trump points to as the whole point of this entire saga?
Well, I mean, look, that's been the narrative from the very beginning on this. I mean, there's always been the narrative, well, Biden was just following through an administration policy and was following through with what, the United Nations and others were saying and the concern about Ukraine. Well, that may be true, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something there, even though that policy may have been a policy that was preferred by those in power at the time.
No, but isn't that exactly what that means? I mean, I've had the ambassador from back then who's testified, who said that Joe Biden was doing what was policy at the time and what internationally was agreed upon as a good thing, that he did not do any wrong. Kurt Volker here is saying Biden was in the right.
The question is whether he had other motives, and whether there were other reasons he was doing it, in addition to those, quote, legitimate motives that were talked about. And so that we don't know. And that's what the president wants to find out, whether there was something else that the vice president knew at the time, and that this policy that was from the top was also very consistent with something he wanted to accomplish on a personal level.
But Joe, even with the special envoy to Ukraine saying that there was essentially nothing there when it comes to Joe Biden, it's still not going to be enough.
Well, it's not going to be enough for some who are trying to distract from what's going on with the president. I think what really is curious to me is the Republican talking point for the last 2 days is this is second and third hand information.
Right.
First off, there's a lot of first hand information, but it's the president who's keeping Mick Mulvaney from testifying, Rick Perry from testifying, Mike Pompeo from testifying. These are people who have first hand information, and if they had exculpatory information on this, I guarantee you they'd be up in the hill and they'd all share an Uber up there to talk to the committee. The White House is stonewalling for a reason. John Dean, can give us chapter and verse on why you stonewall. You're hiding your guilt. And if they continue to say second hand and third hand, they're walking into an argument they can't win, because we can't get at some of this stuff because they won't let us. If you look at OMB, which held the money up, you will find that someone, probably the chief of staff, this is the way it would have worked in the Clinton White House, the chief of staff would have instructed them, there's a reason to hold the money or send the money. That conversation is not a privileged conversation. It's not talking to the president. That conversation is highly relevant here, and the White House is doing everything they can, including defying valid subpoenas, to make sure that these people can't testify. Those are the actions of a guilty party.
Nia, there's let's talk about, in terms of Volker, let's call it, I don't know, a complicating factor here is that he did, in his testimony, also deny knowledge of a quid pro quo in testifying that, he said this, you asked what conversations did I have about that quid pro quo, etc. None, because I didn't know that there was a quid pro quo. What is the impact when you compare that to Sondland?
Yeah, I mean, here, I think if you're the White House, you're going to try to cling on to that, right, and say, listen, this guy was involved. He says there was no quid pro quo. There was testimony from Tim Morrison where he essentially said he was on the call, didn't see anything illegal about what was on there, what was said on there. Of course, impeachment doesn't have anything to do with being illegal necessarily. So, yeah, I mean, I think the White House is going to try to cherry pick facts that make them look good. I think in terms of Volcker, I mean, we do know that there were sort of two tracks of foreign policy here, yes, and not everybody was involved in both of those tracks.
The three amigos, if you will. Out front for us next, we have breaking news. Polls just closing in Kentucky and Virginia, where the president is not on the ballot, of course, but looms large. John King has the very latest on the results that are coming in at the Magic Wall. Plus, former President Obama making a major play this election day. Why are all eyes on Virginia tonight? Breaking news, it is election night in America, and we're getting some of the first results coming out of Kentucky. All eyes on that governor's race, where incumbent Republican Governor Matt Bevin is in a tough re-election battle against Democratic challenger Andy Beshear, the state's attorney general, of course. It's a race that we know that the president is watching closely, but let's see what's happening first on the ground. John King is out front with us now at the Magic Wall. So, John, what are you seeing so far? Does it look like this is shaping up to be a competitive race?
We will see. There are some indications it could. If you look at the results right now and you're watching at home and you're not all that familiar with Kentucky, you would say, oh, the Republican incumbent governor has a 10-point lead over his Democratic challenger. Matt Bevin seeking a second term. No Republican governor of Kentucky has ever won one of those. Andy Beshear's dad was governor. He's now the state attorney general, so he's a well-known Democrat. So this was a great race anyway, Kate. It also will give us some clues about 2020, which makes it even more important, and the president was there last night. So if you look at this right now, again, you're saying the Republican incumbent in a Republican state is up by 10 points with about 41% of the vote in. He's looking strong. However, I will say this. Andy Beshear so far is outperforming, if you will, the Democrat from 4 years ago when Matt Bevin won. That's 85,000 votes, give or take a few right there, the margin then. If you come back now, this at the moment is a closer race. So if you're in the Democratic campaign, what are you looking for? Well, you're expecting most of this rural area here to fill in red. You're expecting Matt Bevin to win most of that. The issue is the population is declining in most of Kentucky's rural counties, and it is growing in the suburban area. So first, let's come into an urban area. Jefferson County, Louisville, only 4% in here. Andy Beshear with a good lead here. I will give you this as we watch forward. As this number grows, that percentage has to grow too. He needs to win not only by 52. He needs, if he can take that up and run up the numbers here where the people live in the urban areas, it would put him back in play. We'll see if that happens. Another thing just to keep an eye on. Just want to show you one area. Remember in the 2018 midterms, what was the big story? In the Trump presidency, Republicans are getting hammered in the suburbs. That's why Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. The Covington area up here, it's the Cincinnati, Ohio suburbs, if you will, in northern Kentucky. Just want to go back in time just to show you. Right now, Andy Beshear is winning up here. If you go back a few years, Matt Bevin won this area in this part of the state. If you pop it out a little bit here, he won it, not only won it, but he won it pretty comfortably. So we'll watch the suburbs as this goes on. We have some votes to count before we know who's going to win. Again, the Democrat tonight, at the moment, outperforming the Democrat of 4 years ago. Still a lot of votes to count, though.
Fascinating. That's the suburbs there. That's really interesting to watch tonight. So there's also another big race in Mississippi. What else are you watching for tonight?
Well, you'll watch the Mississippi race. Again, we always talk about these things in the national context. So let's just pop this up here and let me get you back to 2019. We don't have any results here yet because the polls close at the top of the hour. Look, Mississippi is a red state. However, you do have a state attorney general who's the Democrat versus the lieutenant governor who's a Republican. It's an open race, two very well-known names. Doug Jones did win in Alabama, so Democrats are looking to see, is there any clues, any seeds of a potential Democratic comeback in the Deep South, which has been ruby red for quite a while. So we'll watch this race. Do we expect Mississippi to be competitive in 2020 in the presidential race? No. But might there be a few lessons to learn tonight? Maybe.
There's one prediction from John King. Early tonight. Great to see you, man. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Out front next, tough new talk from Joe Biden just coming out, attacking Elizabeth Warren, calling her an elitist, saying her out-of-touch plans will hand Donald Trump the presidency again in 2020. Plus, these supporters are dressing to impress the president. Breaking breaking news. Polls are just closed in Virginia, where Democrats are hoping to make history by winning control of both the state House and the state Senate. If they are successful, it would be the first time in 25 years that Democrats have controlled both chambers there and the governor's mansion. It's a race that could have major ripple effects, though, far beyond Virginia. Ryan Nobles is out front.
The name Donald Trump isn't on a single ballot in Virginia today.
We're going to get this done.
But the name Deborah Rodman is. She is a Democrat and a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. She first ran for office in 2017 in response to President Trump's White House victory, and says that Trump is a big part of why Democrats in her state are so energized.
I'm excited that there is national focus, but I think this race it's a microcosm of what we're going to see next year nationwide.
Her opponent is Siobhan Donovan, a Republican incumbent who's trying to keep Democrats from winning the entire state legislature for the first time in 2 decades. And someone who believes while Washington politics loom large, it's not the entire story.
How much are people talking to you about President Trump, or is it not even an issue that people are concerned about?
Definitely people have opinions. You go to the doors and they're one way or the other, but by the time we're finished talking about local issues and what we're getting done, they're all on board.
But the national attention is undeniable.
Here in Virginia, progressives are going to win.
Democratic presidential candidates with their eyes on 2020 have rushed to the Commonwealth. In addition to visits from Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden,
the rest of the nation is watching you. And Virginia, turn Virginia all blue, all blue.
Former President Barack Obama, who carried the state twice, tweeted his support of a collection of Virginia Democrats, including Rodman. That Democratic enthusiasm, fueled by opposition to President Trump, was evident at the polls today.
I do care about what's going on in Washington because it's crap, and I'm embarrassed about what's going on.
Now, we should point out that Republicans still feel that they do have a base of support here in Virginia. Both President Trump, Vice President Mike Pence getting involved in getting out the Republican vote here. Now, the polls did close about 50 minutes ago, far too early to determine who's going to come out on top here. But, Kate, in the past, President Trump said that he still believes he can win here in 2020. Just a small example of how there are major national implications for these local races tonight.
Absolutely. Ryan, thanks so much. Out front with me now, CNN political director David Chalian. So, David, on this, I mean, President Trump has been very, very present in both the Mississippi and Kentucky races, for example, going there to try and rally supporters ahead of today's votes. He hasn't done that really, save a tweet, if you will, in Virginia. Is there an obvious reason why?
Yeah, not just present in the rallies, Kate, also on the airwaves. Both of those Republican gubernatorial candidates eager to show President Trump's embrace of them. They think that is their path to success tonight. Why doesn't the president go to Virginia? Because the Virginia battle is playing out in a lot of those suburban areas that you were talking to John King about earlier, that the very areas that fueled the rise for Democrats to the House majority in 2018, the very areas where they have been making inroads in the Trump era in American politics, are the areas where a lot of these battleground state House and state Senate races that can determine total control. So the question was, Donald Trump going there, would he do more harm than good for the cause?
Yeah. I want to ask you real quick, David, about a really big statement that presidential candidate Joe Biden, he just released on Medium. He doesn't name Elizabeth Warren, but it's very clear who he's talking about, taking a big swipe at her. In this piece that they put out, he hits Warren for taking the my way or the highway approach to her campaign and calling her approach condescending, and also saying this, that it's representative of an elitism that working and middle-class people do not share. We know best. You know nothing. If you were only as smart as I am, you would agree with me. That from Joe Biden. I mean, what do you make of it?
Yeah, them are fighting words. There's no doubt about it. Joe Biden, over the course of the last week to 10 days, has been on a daily basis sharpening his critique of Elizabeth Warren. He is done just dismissing her plans as unrealistic. He is now trying to clearly take her down a notch, seeing a threat there. We're 90 days out from the Iowa caucuses, and you heard it in his speech on Friday night in Iowa. You've heard it throughout the weekend on the campaign trail. This is a Joe Biden sharpening the contrast with Elizabeth Warren.
It's fascinating. Great to see you, David. Thank you.
You too.
Out front next, Jeannie Mose on how President Trump's new mantra is starting to wear on his supporters. dressing to impress the president. Here's Jeannie.
The human backdrop behind President Trump.
Impeachment witch hunt. Impeachment.
Booed and chanted. And kissed. Even translated President Trump's words to gestures.
These people are crazy.
But all anyone noticed was what was on the T-shirts they were wearing.
Read the transcript.
Yeah, read the transcript.
Read the transcript. Except that we can't.
Because it's not a transcript. It's a summary of President Trump's call with the president of Ukraine. Nevertheless, to convince people,
it was perfect.
Read the transcript has become the president's mantra.
My father put the transcript out. Read it.
The T-shirts that said, read the transcript, evoked responses like, read the Mueller report. Alternative T-shirt slogans, such as, I would like you to do us a favor, though, were suggested. There were plenty of doubters asking whether all those human props wearing read the transcript actually read the transcript. Someone tweeted, so I guess I need a shirt that has the actual transcript on it, because these apparently only read T-shirts and hats. But Trump supporters loved the read the transcript apparel, classic Trump trolling.
The do-nothing Democrats the hell out of office soon.
President Trump has said he might read the transcript aloud as a fireside chat on live TV, which lit a fire under Washington Post writer Jonathan Capehart.
I would like you to do us a favor, though. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son. So if you can look into it, ...
Now selling for $30 on the Trump campaign website, read the transcript T-shirts, or maybe you prefer, I read the transcript, impeach Trump now. I'll give you this one if you give me that one. Does that count as a quid pro quo? Jeannie Mose, CNN.
You know what they say?
New York.
No, you know what they say?
Thanks so much for joining us. AC360 starts now.
Good evening. The man who gave $1 million to President Trump's inaugural and was then awarded by being named ambassador to the European Union has just blown a large hole in President Donald J. Trump's cover story. Gordon Sondland's impeachment testimony was released today, but it turns out he'd revised his previous testimony. Apparently, his faulty memory was suddenly restored after details of other witness testimony made clear that Sondland's original story didn't quite add up. Sondland now says, yes, there was a quid pro quo, and he was the guy who was trying to deliver it for the president. A scheme, he testified, got more insidious, his word, over time, involving activities he said would be improper and, though he said he's not a lawyer, assumed could be illegal. Sondland now admits that he knew the bottom line. His testimony indicates his Ukrainian counterparts knew it as well and knew the demands were coming from President Trump. In short, no U.S. military aid until Ukraine publicly did the president two political favors. And if that were the sum total of what Sondland, the ambassador of the European Union, told House investigators, that would be plenty, but it wasn't. His testimony, and that of Kurt Volker, the president's former special Ukraine envoy, also lays out some of the mechanics of this thinly veiled shakedown masquerading as foreign policy. It puts one man in the middle of it all, Rudy Giuliani, the president's private attorney. Not elected to anything, not confirmed by anyone, acting on no one's behalf, but the president's and possibly his own, given his interest in doing bigger business in Ukraine. Giuliani emerges as the central figure here in what was, according to the testimony, exactly what the president and his defenders have been saying it was not.
No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. No quid pro quo.
Well, that, as you know, was a pillar of the president's defense even before we saw the rough transcript of his July 25th call with Ukraine's President Zelensky. In it, you'll remember Zelensky asked for the aid. He says, quote, I would also like to thank you for your great support in the area of defense. We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes. To which the president immediately replies, I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. He then asked Zelensky to investigate a conspiracy theory about Ukraine being behind the hack of the DNC, not Russia. Mr. Trump also wants help with what he calls the other thing, which is really all about Joe Biden and his son and investigating them. So this is what he says on the so-called transcript the president wants everyone to read, allegedly, and it already seems explicit enough. But now, here's what Sondland says in his revised testimony, referring to a conversation on the 1st of September with the top advisor to President Zelensky. Quoting from Sondland, "I now recall speaking individually with Mr. Yermak, where I said the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks." Now, you might look at that and say, well, corruption, of course, that's all the president's ever been interested in. He wants to clean up corruption in Ukraine. That's been the White House main line of defense.
The conversation I had was largely congratulatory, was largely corruption, all of the corruption taking place.
It's like, look, this is a corrupt place. I don't want to send them a bunch of money and have them waste it, have them spend it, have them use it to line their own pockets.
It was about helping the Ukrainians to get graft out and corruption outside of their government.
Corruption is incredible in Ukraine, which bothered me a lot.
But keeping them honest, I mean, let's be real. There has never been any evidence of the president being interested at all in fighting corruption anywhere until this story came to light. And as Ambassador Sondland said in his opening statement, the only so-called corruption the president was concerned with just happened to involve the president attempting to absolve Russia of responsibility for the DNC hack and digging up dirt against the Bidens, his main political rival. Sondland describes talking about it with Rudy Giuliani starting in August. Quoting now from Sondland, "In these short conversations, Mr. Giuliani emphasized that the president wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing Ukraine to look into anti-corruption issues. Mr. Giuliani specifically mentioned the 2016 election, including the DNC server and Burisma, as two anti-corruption investigatory topics of importance for the president." So the message was corruption, meaning the Bidens and 2016. And as this was unfolding, aid that had been approved last year by Congress was still not flowing to Ukraine. Remember, too, that on the July 25th call, the Ukrainians had already been in touch with Giuliani, and the president was asking Zelensky to talk with him directly. Giuliani's clearly the heart of this Ukraine adventure, but now it seems Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also has some explaining to do. Thanks to Gordon Sondland's testimony, we now know that Secretary Pompeo knew full well Giuliani was up to something. Question: did you ever discuss Rudy Giuliani with Secretary Pompeo? Sondland: only in general terms. Question: and what did you discuss? Sondland: that he's involved in affairs, and Pompeo rolled his eyes and said, yes, it's something we have to deal with. And as Kurt Volker explains, the Ukrainians knew that as well. In his testimony, he refers back to May and what he saw as a negative narrative forming in the president's mind about Ukraine. Quoting from Volker now, "After sharing my concerns with Ukrainian leadership, an advisor to President Zelensky asked me to connect him to the president's personal lawyer, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. I did so. I did so solely because I understood that the new Ukrainian leadership wanted to convince those like Mayor Giuliani who believe such a negative narrative about Ukraine that times have changed and that under President Zelensky, Ukraine is worthy of U.S. support." Volker goes on to say that he made it clear to the Ukrainians that Giuliani does not represent the U.S. government. Now, Volker was right about that, technically. Giuliani wasn't representing America. He was representing Donald J. Trump, possibly his own business interests. Giuliani was essentially the bagman. He had the money, or at least access to the money through the president. Ukraine desperately needed that money, and it was clear to the Ukrainians what they were expected to do to get it. That's the quid pro quo. The quid pro quo that diplomat William Taylor had heard Gordon Sondland conveyed to a top Ukrainian official, which Sondland now admits, yeah, he did in his revised testimony. NSC staffer Alexander Vindman also testified that Sondland mentioned a quid pro quo, saying, quote, "Ambassador Sondland started to speak about Ukraine delivering specific investigations to secure the meeting with the president, at which time Bolton, the national security advisor, cut the meeting short." So we're awaiting transcripts of their testimony. Meantime, one leading Republican senator who once claimed he was open to new evidence now says he's heard enough and doesn't want to read anything. Listen to Lindsey Graham just last month.
Are you open-minded if more comes out that you could support impeachment?
Sure. I mean, show me something that is a crime. If you could show me that, you know, Trump actually was engaging in a quid pro quo outside the phone call, that would be very disturbing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty clear because now all this testimony shows that. Well, today, Lindsey Graham says he will not be reading any of these transcripts, telling reporters, quote, "I've written the whole process off." A lot to cover, starting with one of the lawmakers who's been hearing all this testimony, Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia. I spoke to him just before airtime. Congressman, the big revision in Sondland's testimony, does it strengthen your case, do you think, the fact that he suddenly remembers there was a quid pro quo?
You know, I think the revision by Ambassador Sondland is very significant. First of all, it dawned on him that he could find that his testimony previously could be construed as lying to Congress under oath, which is a crime. And so he hastened to correct it after he saw the other transcripts contradicting him. But more importantly, I think, for the president's defense and his acolytes, his supporters in Congress, is that his defense, in case anyone hasn't noticed, is now on the floor. It's crumbled because Ambassador Sondland explicitly admitted in his corrective testimony today that a quid pro quo most certainly did occur, and that he, Ambassador Sondland, was propounding it.
He didn't directly connect the quid pro quo to President Trump, though. Does that provide the president some cover here?
I don't think so. We have the president's own words in the transcript of the phone conversation of July 25th with the new president of Ukraine, and we have lots of other testimony corroborating that it was the will of the president and it was directly coming from him that these so-called investigations, meaning get dirt on Joe Biden, had to be insisted upon in return for the release of military aid and the promise of a presidential visit between the two presidents.
Do you believe that he just forgot this stuff? That, I mean, of all the, I'm sure he has a lot of important things on his plate, but this would seem a pretty major thing to have just kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I think that's highly unlikely. Remember that the whole defense rested on the assertion there was no quid pro quo. And all of Trump's Republican acolytes who attend these sessions went out and had a press conference after deposition saying, see, we heard from Ambassador Sondland and there was no quid pro quo. Well, now there is a quid pro quo, according to Ambassador Sondland. So now what do you do? How do you take back those words? How do you take back that insistence? And so they seem to now be doing what's quickly becoming known as the full Mulvaney. Okay, there was a quid pro quo. So what? Get over it. That's quite an abrupt change in course and direction, but it's probably the last defense they've got for indefensible action.
One of the big players, obviously, in all of this is Secretary of State Pompeo. I think just yesterday you called him a coward. You said he's, quote, disqualified himself from continuing to serve as the Secretary of State. What specifically do you believe that Pompeo has done that should disqualify him from holding his position?
Remember that as the Secretary of State, you are charged with helping to develop and execute American foreign policy. But you're also charged with the duty of fostering, nourishing, growing, protecting the foreign service of the United States, the men and women who are charged in embassies and consulates all over the world who put themselves in danger on occasion. Your job is to protect those people, defend those people as the agency head, not to turn your head away from an active campaign of slander to essentially force Ambassador Yovanovitch out of her job. And Pompeo turned the other way, pretending he didn't know anything. He didn't act on any of the concerns that were brought to his attention. And an honorable public servant, Ambassador Yovanovitch, had her reputation damaged and her personal security put at risk in Ukraine. And that's dishonorable and that's cowardly.
Doesn't it seem, though, that Secretary of State Pompeo essentially sees himself as, and wants to be in the inner circle of President Trump, and that's who he sees his paymaster is, as opposed to, the rank and file of the State Department or, the American people? It seems like this is part of the, paying fealty to the president.
Well, you and I both know, Anderson, that there's a lot more to the job than that. He takes an oath, and that oath isn't to the President of the United States. It's to the Constitution of the United States. And he has a broader set of responsibilities than to one individual. We have lots of examples going into American history in the past where honorable men and women
have served the Secretary of State and have been willing to take on the president when they thought he was wrong. I can think of George Shultz during the Reagan years. Cy Vance resigned during the Carter years when he disagreed with the policy. He thought that was the honorable thing to do. Where is the honor here?
Congressman Connolly, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Edison. Thank you.
More perspective now. Joining us, CNN Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, CNN Chief Legal Analyst Jeffrey Toobin, and CNN Senior Political Commentator David Axelrod, host of The Axe Files and former Senior Advisor to President Obama. So, Jeff, there was now a quid pro quo. So remember, suddenly Ambassador Sondland. This is a big deal. I mean, Connolly certainly thinks it is. Do you think so?
It's a very big deal. I mean, because he was in the middle of this foreign policy. I mean, he was the point person. That was established very early on in this process, and the fact that he now acknowledges it is, I think, close to conclusive evidence of what happened here. You know, the issue of his changing testimony, a lot of people have been raising the specter. Is he going to commit? Did he commit a crime? Does he get out of committing a crime by changing his testimony? The short answer is, no prosecutor is going to bring a case when someone voluntarily comes forward and corrects the record. So I don't think he's in legal trouble. He's probably going to be very unpopular in the White House in the future.
David?
You know, one of the interesting things about it, it seems like this has been going on for years, but it's been just weeks ago that people sat here and on your show and other places defending the president, saying, well, it couldn't be a quid pro quo if the Ukrainians didn't know that this aid was being withheld for that reason. Now we have someone who's attesting to the fact that he delivered the message to an aide to the president of Ukraine. So the Ukrainians very well knew that was what was at stake, and they knew what was being asked.
Right. Yeah. And Dana, even based on New York Times reporting, and others, the Washington Post and others, I mean, they knew going back to the prior regime in Ukraine. Giuliani was operating there as far back as last February.
Yeah, absolutely. And what David Axelrod just said is so key, because it does take away the argument on the timeline and on, well, even the Ukrainians didn't complain about it. But the other thing it does is, as far as we know, it takes away any witness so far who was given a deposition that says anything other than the fact that there was a quid pro quo. It's unanimous.
Right. And also, I mean, Jeff, Sondland is not a deep state actor. I mean, for all those who have that conspiracy theory, who believe that there's this deep state working against the president, I mean, he's the guy who gave $1 million to the inaugural.
The first thing you said on the program tonight was that the whole reason he's there is not because he's an expert in Central European politics. He's there, as ambassadors frequently are. They are rewards to big campaign contributors. He gave $1 million, which even today is a substantial amount of money for a political campaign. He gave $1 million to the inaugural. So, I mean, he's a lifelong Republican. Mm-hmm. He's in the Pacific Northwest. He's from Portland, and his hotels are in Seattle. He's been sort of in a beleaguered minority in a very democratic part of the country, and he was rewarded. The idea that you could call him a member of the deep state or a never-Trumper is just absurd.
More of a shallow swamp character than a deep state character.
One thing that I wonder, and maybe Jeffrey, having been a prosecutor, can answer this, is whether or not he is going to be. It's hard to imagine he won't be invited or asked to come as part of the public testimony, and whether or not he will then be a credible witness if Republicans are going to point out the fact that his story's changed, and if that will hurt the Democrats' case.
I have a question. I have a question that wasn't clear to me from the coverage today or his corrected testimony. Who exactly told him that this aid was dependent on? Was it Rudy Giuliani? Did the president himself? I think that question has to be
I mean, he did not tie it directly to President Trump.
No. And I think that's going to be one line of defense, that all these people who have testified, with the exception of the people who are actually on the call with Zelensky, they didn't have much contact with Trump himself. So one of the lines of defense will be, this is all hearsay. We don't have anyone saying Trump wanted a quid pro quo. This is why John Bolton's testimony is so important, and we'll see whether it happens, because he was someone who had direct contact.
They've been arguing hearsay, though, from the time the whistleblower came forward, true. And all that collapsed as more people confirmed what the whistleblower first said. We're going to pick this up and back in a minute. There's some breaking election news, a potential upset in Kentucky's race for governor. a key test for the president. CNN's John King joins us now with that. John, what's going on?
The Democrat is leading in the race right now, Anderson. That's what's going on. We're up to 87% of the vote. You think of Kentucky as a ruby red state. The president was just there last night. Matt Bevin is the incumbent Republican governor seeking a second term. At the moment, he's trailing. Andy Beshear is the state attorney general. He's the son of a former Democratic governor. So, yes, there's a Trump factor here, but there's also some local politics at play. A polarizing Republican governor, a Democratic attorney general whose family has a history in the state, and at the moment, 50% for Democrat Andy Beshear, just shy of 48% for the Republican governor. We're up to 87%. So what are we looking for right now? Number one, Andy Beshear's victory, his lead, he was behind early on. His lead comes from here, Louisville and the suburbs. Remember the suburbs part. Urban turnout good for Democrats, the suburban turnout as well. He's running at 66% here to 32%, more than 2 to 1 in the largest population center of the state. That's a big number. I just want to go back in time for you here. The Democrat carried this last time, but not by this margin. So you're seeing not only in the urban area, but in the suburbs of Louisville as well, Andy Beshear overperforming the last Democratic nominee. And another reminder, the suburbs have been very difficult for Republicans in the age of Trump. One more reminder of that. You come up here, this is the Covington area, Campbell County, Cincinnati, Ohio. These are suburbs of Cincinnati right here in the state. Andy Beshear, the Democrat, 100% is in here, but he's 53 to 45. If you go back to the last governor's race, it was Matt Bevin who won with 54% of the vote here. This is a textbook case. We saw this in 2018. Suburbs that used to be rock-solid Republican, moving away from the Republican Party. You're seeing it in Kentucky tonight. Let's come back again to tonight's vote as we watch it come in. So what are we waiting for? One thing, if you're the Republicans and you're asking, can we come back? You're glad they're at 100% counted here in Fayette County. This is Lexington, a Democratic area in the city, but again, suburbs here. And again, I just want to go back in time. Look at that 65%. In the governor's race last time, only 54% for the Democratic candidate. So Andy Beshear well overperforming the Democrat from 4 years ago. The question now, Anderson, is with 88% reporting, what's out and missing? You see these counties that are gray. But the issue in these counties is, yes, they will most likely come in red. Not a lot of people, though, if you look at the vote 4 years ago. So if you're doing the math now in both campaign headquarters, the Democrats thinking, can we pull off this upset? You're trying to do some math. How many votes possible out there and how many still to count right here?
All right, John, thanks very much. We could be close to a call there. We're also going to be looking at the race in Mississippi as well as races in Virginia. Coming up next, more on the Ukraine story, Rudy Giuliani's role as well. What happens to all the witnesses this week who have refused to testify? Will anything happen to them? That's ahead. Ambassador Gordon Sondland says he understood as far back as late May that if Ukraine's president wanted a meeting with the president, he needed to make a public anti-corruption statement. That's what they were officially calling it. The demand, Sondland told House investigators, had been communicated by Rudy Giuliani. Quote, I understood, Sondland said in a revision to his deposition, that satisfying Mr. Giuliani was a condition for scheduling the White House visit. The visit, we should point out, that wouldn't have been just ceremonial. Ukraine has been fighting Russian-backed forces now for 5 years. It's trench warfare in Ukraine. Signaling American support for Ukraine is vital to Kiev, and President Trump knows it. Back now with Dana Bash, Jeff Toobin, and David Axelrod. David, satisfying Mr. Giuliani, what that took to satisfy wasn't a giant anti-corruption drive on Ukrainian officials that Giuliani's never heard of. It was going after the Bidens, and it was...
Nor is Giuliani a diplomat and really isn't an agent of American foreign policy. He was on a political mission, and that political mission was to try and get backup for the 2016 kind of conspiracy theory about Ukraine and that election, and to dirty up Biden. And we should point out that Republicans, particularly when this whole caper started, were deeply, deeply worried about Joe Biden. They still, there was a poll today that had him 17 points ahead of Donald Trump. So scuffing up Biden was a major item, and sending Rudy Giuliani as his political agent gave him some insulation. He didn't want the diplomats to handle this. This was a political job.
Dana, the former U.S. Special Envoy, Kurt Volker, in his testimony says he was not aware of any quid pro quo. The White House is kind of clinging on to that today. It doesn't mean that there wasn't one.
Right. It doesn't mean that there wasn't one. And that's really the key here. They'll cling on to what they can find. If you actually look through Volker and the transcript, he did kind of give something for everybody. I thought one of the things that that Democrats can and should point to just on the political level is that he makes very clear he sees no evidence in any of the conspiracy theories that Rudy Giuliani was pushing, just on the just basic facts of it about Joe Biden. That the suggestion that Joe Biden, tried to get somebody fired, that Hunter Biden, benefited, all of those things, he says flatly in this interview under questioning from Republicans, that's not true. It didn't happen, and then goes on to say not just that, but the goal of trying to push that instead of trying to help the bilateral relationship flourish was really, really detrimental to national security.
Jeff, the idea that there has to be somebody who testifies that the president said, hold up the aid because I want to get dirt on the Bidens and I want them to investigate this, this server thing. Is that true? In order to build a case, where obviously this is not a legal case, it's a political issue at this point.
I think you just answered the question. I mean, this is, if you are a Republican who is looking for a reason to either vote against impeachment or vote against conviction, you can find one. Right. You can say there's not enough evidence against the president, that you only have secondhand people saying that there was a quid pro quo. You can say that this is not important enough, that this was within the realm of a president's authority and we don't overturn elections in light of it. You can say any of those things and vote no. But I mean, was there a quid pro quo here? I don't think you can seriously entertain looking at the evidence we've seen. And by the way, we are going to see several of these people testify live and in person before the Intelligence Committee, which is likely to have probably more of a political impact than just a bunch of nerds like us who sat around reading this all day. But, I mean, that I think is likely to, that if anything's going to change minds, that's going to be it.
Yeah, we got to take a break. Dana Bash, Jeff Toobin, David Axelrod, thank you. Coming up next, all eyes on Kentucky right now, the governor's race. We're going to revisit that in just a moment. It is very close to an upset. We'll bring you a live update ahead. We're watching some potentially big election night news unfold right now in front of us. It's happening in Kentucky. John King's been watching the vote totals grow, and with them a possible defeat for the Republican incumbent, the governor. John, what's the latest in the numbers?
Anderson, this is a very close race, and you have the Democrat, Andy Beshear, leading right now by just shy of 22,000 votes. 92% of the vote counted. The Republican incumbent, Matt Bevin, at 48%. He is trailing in a race which has been very closely contested, very nasty and personal, and it has now the presidential involvement because President Trump went and visited just last night, a state the president carried easily in 2016. Let's go back and take a look at that. If you go back to the presidential race and look at the state of Kentucky, it was a blowout, right? So this is Trump country. If you go back to 2015, when Matt Bevin was first elected governor, he won in a more competitive race, but still almost 10 points there, 8-9 point margin there. And so what is happening tonight? Watch the blue on the map here as we come in. Number one, here in Jefferson County, Louisville and the close-in suburbs, Andy Beshear running it up significantly, close to 100,000 vote margin there. So this is the cushion, if you will. This is what brought him back when he was trailing when these votes came in. And again, it's a pattern we have seen in recent elections. Urban areas, the close-in suburbs, the Democrats winning and winning big. You find it the same when you come over here to Fayette County, Lexington, the suburbs around Lexington. Look at the margin for Andy Beshear, 100% of the vote counted here. But look at that tonight, 65-33. Just go back in time. Yes, the Democrat won this area 4 years ago, but the margin much greater tonight. Again, more Democratic strength in the cities, turnout, and in the suburbs as well. Pop it out just a little bit more. I want to show you, we showed you this a little bit earlier. You come up here, the Covington, Kentucky area, which is Campbell County. Cincinnati, Ohio is right here. These are the suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio. Andy Beshear winning this suburban area there, an 8-point lead there. Go back in time. Matt Bevin won it by a significant margin just 4 years ago. So more proof of the suburban shift, the suburban run, if you will, away from the Republican Party in the Trump era. It's not all Trump. Matt Bevin has been a very polarizing, controversial governor. Andy Beshear is the state attorney general. He's the son of the last Democratic governor, so the name is well known. We will focus on the urban areas and the close-in suburbs. Anderson, I just want to point this out as well. Because the Beshear name is well known, look at these rural areas out here. You see the blue out here? You see the blue here? You watch this play out here? Most of this, the vote count, comes from these urban and suburban areas. But Andy Beshear is in play to possibly have a big upset here in Kentucky. If you go back in time, a lot more red in this area 4 years ago, a lot more blue tonight. Andy Beshear running stronger in some of these smaller rural counties that have drifted to the Republicans. So he's making the gains in the cities and the suburbs that we have seen Democrats make in other states. And he's also running very strong in these rural areas, helping him. Right now, we're up to 93%. And the Democrats on the verge, we're not there yet, we're still counting votes, but on the verge of in play for a major upset.
All right, John King, stay with us. We want to bring in our political team. David Axelrod is back, joining us as well. CNN political director David Chalian, USA Today columnist Kirsten Powers, and former RNC chief of staff Mike Shields. David Axelrod, let's start with you. How significant is this, if in fact it continues in this way?
Well, it is significant. I mean, with all the disclaimers that John just offered about how unpopular Bevin was.
Why was he so unpopular?
He's an abrasive figure. He had controversies with the teachers. He had controversies over Medicaid there. But fundamentally, he's a disagreeable character, and that has dogged him throughout. But, you know, he won by almost 9 points last time. He clearly is struggling here. And the President of the United States went there last night and would not have gone there if he thought that he was going to lose. They were looking forward to these races to jumpstart, to signify that he still has, strength, that he still has momentum. But what it is doing is underscoring things that are concerning, and particularly this drift away from Republicans and him in the suburbs. And that's something that we're going to have to watch. The other person who's going to be watching this is Mitch McConnell, who's up for re-election next year. Now, with Trump on the ballot, you would think that he would be fine. And Donald Trump's not going to lose the state of Kentucky. But you can see the disquiet that's out there. And if you extrapolate to other battleground states, this is a big concern.
David Chalian, what stands out to you right now?
Yeah, well, what David was saying is certainly true. I mean, John was comparing it to how Bevin performed in those suburban counties 4 years ago, Anderson. In those areas around Cincinnati, Donald Trump won those counties by 24, 26 points that Beshear is winning now. Now, two things. It is true. Beshear is a certain kind of Democrat who can do this in Kentucky. So I do think it will launch, should he win tonight, some conversations about what kind of Democrat can indeed extenuate these advances that Democrats are making in suburbs, and maybe also dig into some rural areas or deal with some more conservative and moderate voters. That'll be a conversation around sort of how a Democrat can make inroads in Trump country. That's one. But two, no matter how much Republicans will try to distance Bevin as his own guy, David called him a disagreeable fellow. He's certainly got that issue. He has not been wildly popular. He challenged Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, remember? So this is not your most idealized Republican, no doubt about that. He's not doing as well as the other Republicans are on the ballot. But I would just note, as much as Republicans may try to separate him out and say this is a Bevin thing, I think you cannot lose sight of Donald Trump going in there at the end. We've seen him do this in other areas where it really has juice turnout. And if he was not able to do that here, even for an unpopular Republican, that is going to be a question mark that hangs around his head.
Kirsten, how do you see this?
Yeah, well, I think that last point that David was just making, which is that Donald Trump, Bevin closely aligned himself with Donald Trump. There's no question he was looking for the president to pull him, over the finish line. And Donald Trump went down there and made it very clear that he was behind him. I also think this is, they were running on impeachment as well. You had Republicans running ads against the Democrat, basically tying him to the impeachment process. And so this is sort of the first referendum we're seeing of how people are going to respond to the idea. Will it get Donald Trump's voters excited enough to turn out? And if they don't, then I think that that's a data point for the Republicans and for the Democrats.
Mike Shields, how do you see this as a Republican?
Well, first of all, full disclosure, my firm did some work on this campaign, and so I have a unique insight to this. Bevin started down double figures. He did have a huge popularity problem in this race, and on the same ticket as him, Daniel Cameron is winning the Attorney General's race by 20 points. So you have a lot of Beshear Cameron voters. He is, by the way, a very promising young African-American Attorney General who was a protege of Mitch McConnell. So Mitch McConnell's actually having a great night because people see him as the successor to Mitch in the future if his career keeps going the way that it does. So Republicans in the state of Kentucky are actually doing pretty well. Bevin is not doing well. And I think if Democrats think they want to extrapolate something from this, look at the way that Andy Beshear ran his campaign and look at how the Democrats who are running for president are talking. They're not even remotely in the same party. This is like Conor Lamb winning a special election by shooting an AK-47 and talking about how he didn't like Nancy Pelosi and he was pro-life in Pennsylvania. The kind of Democrat that can win in Kentucky, what they need is an extremely unpopular governor who's down by double digits, and they need someone like Andy Beshear, and that's just not who the Democrats are right now, and it's none of their presidential candidates.
Yeah, I just want to check in with John just as he's following the vote count. John?
Anderson, we're up to 95% now, and the lead, it was 21,000, I think, last time we talked. It's down to about 12,000 now. So, again, this is nail-biting time in any campaign headquarters when you go through a close one, no matter where you are. So you're looking at the gray areas on the map here. And if you look at them, all of these gray areas, this is areas where we don't have votes yet. These are small rural counties. There's not a lot of people in these counties. The question is, are there enough? All of these counties that you see with no red or blue, the gray, no votes yet. All of them went for Bevin. All of them are Republican rural counties. Now, Andy Beshear is doing better in a lot of these counties, even if he's losing, than the Democrat 4 years ago, to the Mike Shields point he just made. But so here you are at 95%. You're at 12,000 votes. The question is, how much does Bevin win, assuming he wins all these rural counties? How many people turn out? What's the margin there? Are there enough votes? The only thing we're really waiting for on the Democratic side for more potentially decent amount of votes is you still only have 96% in Jefferson County. So you have some late precincts coming in there, and you see the margin. So Andy Beshear can count on some more votes there. When you go to the other areas of the map that are blue, you're just seeing here Franklin County, where Frankfort is, 100% reporting. You move over here to Scott County, 100% reporting. You pop down to Fayette County, which is a major population center, Lexington, and the suburbs here, 100%. So now you're in nail-biting town. You're counting the final precincts, but the lead just shy of 13,000 votes. The Democrats think they're within striking distance of pulling this one out.
All right, we'll see where the numbers go. We're going to take a quick break. More updates when we come back. Race for governor, about 11,000 votes right now. President Trump campaigned in Lexington for the incumbent governor just last night. Certainly not just a referendum on the president, but the shifting vote in suburban areas might say something about his shifting appeal there. Back now with the team, starting with John King. John?
And Anderson, right now, Matt Bevin is hoping and hoping and hoping that these counties in western Kentucky, rural areas that he won last time 4 years ago, not only come in red when the votes come in, but come in red by convincing margins. And I say that, you start to see some of them right in here. Hart County, we have nothing in so far. I just want to go back in time. It's a pretty small county. You see the vote totals last time. He won with 57+% of the vote. The question is, can he run up a percentage like that and also run up the numbers? Because that would get you a net gain of about 800 votes if he repeated 4 years ago. 800 votes is not going to do it if he's going to try to make up what is now an 11,000 vote deficit here. But I just want to show you a couple places we're waiting on. You come over here along. McCracken County here in the western part of the state. You see it here. Matt Bevin, the Republican incumbent, winning this county by almost 10 points. So the question is, with 75% in, what's left? And does he keep that margin? And again, is it enough? This is its frustrating time. Mr. Axelrod and Mr. Shields have both been through this in campaign headquarters on the close ones. You call in all your local precinct captains. You're saying, what do we know? How many people voted? You're trying to figure out when this small county comes in, for example. If you go back 4 years ago, Matt Bevin won it pretty convincingly. But again, you see here, it's 2,400 votes combined there. Sorry, I could get close to the map sometimes and you get sensitive. You pull it back out now. Just want to come back in here as we come into the race. This is back in time. Let's come back to where we are now. 96%, 11,000 votes. The question is, in these small rural counties, both the ones where we have no votes yet and the ones where we're still waiting for the count to be finished. Again, Livingston County, 82% in. Again, that's a big margin for Matt Bevin. The question always is, when the rest of the people vote, how much more can you get? 728 to 1,300. But when you got 8 or 10 little counties like this out, the math is possible. It gets very hard. He essentially has to thread the needle with the rest of the vote coming in. But this is a red area of the state. That's where the outstanding vote is. We're going to wait. I just want to check one more time. If you're in Democratic Party headquarters, you also think you got a little bit more coming in Jefferson County. It's the last of the big, reliable Democratic areas, not at 100%, but a little bit more likely coming in for Andy Beshear here. And again, this is brew the coffee, wait it out, and count them time.
All right, we're going to be doing that, obviously, all night long on CNN. We continue to monitor what's happening in Kentucky. There are other races we're following. We'll be right back. It is a very busy election night. CNN's going to be watching it all this evening. Let's check in with Chris, see what he's working on. Chris?
A fascination, my friend, about why this Andy Beshear-Matt Bevin race matters. And, you know, context is going to provide some clues. Kentucky, obviously, a state that the president won in huge fashion. Matt Bevin did not. The president did go down there and, you know, just this past week and said Bevin is the man. But he had popularity problems in that state. That wasn't so much a function of personal foibles as it was missteps on issues that matter, specifically Medicaid. And that may be a boring subject for people, but it isn't when you're living hand to mouth. And you need that kind of government service. Andy Beshear, supposedly or reportedly, went to the counties that Trump won most in rural areas of Kentucky and said, in less than 5 minutes, here's what I'll do for you. So he kind of pulled a Beto coup. You know what I mean? He went everywhere. And I know Beto's out of the race now, but that worked well for him in Texas in a race that shouldn't have been close for him with Cruz. So Beshear did that. The question becomes, what does it mean for Democrats? Is Beshear a reflection, or is he different than the national picture?
Yeah, we'll take a look at it, Chris. See you about 6 minutes from now. Up next, the latest results in the Kentucky race. The race for governor in Kentucky is very close. 99% of the vote now in. Democrat Andy Beshear holding a narrow lead there, about 10,500 or so, over the Republican incumbent, Matt Bevin, just about 10,000 votes. As I said, President Trump campaigned for him just last night. Sure to be watching these returns closely. The state has seen the cities go blue, which is not unexpected. But in a shift from the last election, key suburbs have seen a substantial move away from the Republican candidate. That, of course, might have national implications for Republicans next year. Of course, the kind of candidate that Beshear is also something that's going to be Beshear is also something that's going to be closely watched, as are statewide races in Virginia, where special attention is being paid to the state Senate there in Virginia. It's now narrowly in Republican control. That too could change overnight. Races in Mississippi as well. We'll get returns throughout the evening. Of course, CNN's going to bring it to you all as it happens. Time to hand it over to Chris for Cuomo Primetime. Chris?
Well, this is a big point of fascination happening on our watch. Anderson, thank you for taking it to this point. This is big breaking election night news. This is a very significant story unfolding in the state of Kentucky. Why? Well, it probably wasn't supposed to happen. I say probably because there's always context in politics. But if Kentucky goes from red to blue, and we understand why it happened, it will be an excellent window into the state of play in the 2020 election. Is the president relevant here? Is impeachment relevant here? Big questions, big results, probably on our watch. So let's get after it. Why does Kentucky matter? Well, I'll tell you all about the state. We're doing our homework right now to make it more relevant as a picture of our country. But here's the headline. Our president won Kentucky by some 30 points in 2016, all right? He killed it. He does very well there. He just went to the state. Now, he is seen as almost indomitable when he comes to stump for a Republican. His win percentage is ridiculously high. And he went for Governor Matt Bevin. Now, he's been running for re-election on a platform of cozying up to the president. He actually took a shot at McConnell, I think in like 2014 or 15, wanting to run against him for Senate. Didn't work out, obviously. But if the turnout is very big, and we believe it is, Bevin losing, despite that push by the president, could very well be relevant. We got to look in a little bit more. Why? We'll talk about it throughout the night. Here's what we know. He is trailing the state's Democratic Attorney General, Andy Beshear. Now, if you follow politics and that name sounds familiar, it's because it is. His father was the governor of Kentucky until 2015, 2007 to 2015. Now, Bevin took over in 2015. The president won by 30 points. He ran by 10 when he won by 10 in 2015. So he's no Trump in his own state. So what is the state of play in this race? Why is it happening this way? And most importantly, when can we call it? Let's bring in CNN's John King. Nobody works the wall like he does. We've been watching you meticulously go through it. What would be and who makes the call and at what point?
We have some excellent people on the decision desk. They're waiting. And Chris, because they're waiting because they play it safe here. As you noted, 10,565 votes is the lead, 99% reporting. What's out? What are we missing? We're missing some votes out here in western, rural, conservative, red Kentucky. So we're just waiting. One little tiny county over here, for example, Ballard County, we don't have any votes in yet. They'll come in like that. When they come in, they tend to all come in at once. It could happen right in the middle of this conversation, but we're waiting to be cautious just to see, are there enough votes out here? You start moving around again in these rural areas. McCracken County, I was looking at this one earlier, but it's now up to 100%. If you're in the Bevin headquarters, you're a little nervous because this county came in, you're winning healthy, but the final votes came in and they weren't enough to cut into the lead. If you click around out here, you see a 91% here in Livingston County. Again, Bevin winning pretty healthy, but you see the overall vote counties here. Even if he gains in the final percent, the math, there's not a lot of votes to do that because it's a small, not that populous county. But we're going to wait and count them as they come in. Now, why is Andy Beshear in the driver's seat right now? Why is the Democrat in this red state 10,000 votes, almost 11,000 votes ahead? First and foremost, you start here, and we've had the same conversation during the Trump presidency. Democrats win in the cities, and they are increasingly running up the margins in the close-in suburbs. Jefferson County, Louisville, and the suburbs, 67%. Look, there's 100,000 votes almost, just shy of a 100,000 vote margin right there. It's in the largest area of the state. I want to go back in time. Yes, the Democrat carried this last time, but with 58%. You want to win an election and you're the Democrat in a state like Kentucky, you got to run it up here, especially in the suburbs. Andy Beshear did that. Let's come back out here and move over. You come across here. It's a smaller county, but it's a Democratic county, Franklin County here. Again, he runs it up pretty good. You keep wandering the neighborhood here. You're talking about suburbs here. Your smaller cities. These are not big cities in Kentucky, but smaller cities. You come in here. Lexington, you see it here. Again, look at the percentage, 65% to 33% tonight. Go back. The Democrat won this 4 years ago, but not by a margin like this. Andy Beshear very much outperforming Jack Conway. One other point, you made note of the president's margin. I want to show you something as we come back to the race tonight. Number one, look up here. And number two, look out here. This is the suburbs up here, the Cincinnati, Ohio suburbs in northern Kentucky right here. They're blue tonight for Andy Beshear. If we go back in time, they were red for Matt Bevin. And again, look out here. This was Matt Bevin 4 years ago. Right? A little blue. Look at tonight. A lot more blue. You made the point that when you were talking to Anderson earlier that Andy Beshear actually went out into these small rural counties and worked it. Said, I can give you better health care. I can give you a better deal. Then your governor, but also your president. He was playing both factors there. And again, he is a well-known name. He is a polarizing governor. There are Kentucky issues, a nasty state race at play here tonight. But it is just unmistakable because of the history and because of the president's visit last night. If you're the president of the United States and you won this state by that, wow, then you're not happy tonight that your candidate, the guy you went down, you wouldn't have gone down last night if you didn't think he was going to eke it out and he was going to win so that you could take credit for it in those morning tweets in the morning. We'll see how we get there. But right now, this is a major story for the Democrats. Andy Beshear, your state attorney general tonight, within striking distance of being the next governor of Kentucky.
On a straight Trump level, he's got cover here, though, right, John? Because he can say Bevin wasn't popular. I tried to help. I tried to do what I can, but he was way behind. So the fact that it was even close is cover. When you're looking at the raw vote totals, John, does anything stand out for you? Do you think we can say at this point that turnout was at all significant?
Well, your biggest point about that, the point you just made, the people are turning out to vote tonight. There's no question about that, and we'll watch this play out. And the Democrats clearly were motivated in this race as well and did a very good job turning out in a state where, frankly, they have struggled operationally, organizationally in the past. But to your point about the president, look, if you're Matt Bevin or if you're a Republican anywhere, you know, as much as we say, ha-ha, the president went in, his guy lost, stain on Trump, he did go in to try to help. And Matt Bevin was behind early in this race and closed late. The other Republicans on the statewide ballot are doing much better than their governor.
Much better. And
much better than their governor. So the president is going to make the point, I tried to help, the guy was toxic.
Yeah, that'll feed the narrative. But then again, there are a lot of other insights to hear about turnout, issues, what worked and what doesn't. This isn't the clearest picture for us, again, because Beshear's got history in the state. You know, his father was a governor there. He's the sitting attorney general. So we'll go through it. John, I'll keep checking back with you. You get in my ear if you have anything that changes. I'll come to you right away. Thank you, my brother. Let's bring in David Axelrod and CNN political director David Chalian. It's good to have you both. When we talk about this state, and why it matters. Axe is sitting next to me. So we look at the state boilerplate. One thing to look out for is there's no automatic recount in this state, but a candidate can request one in court at any level. So we're not looking for a threshold number, as we sometimes are. Bevin could ask it at any level. If the court says yes, he can go. So we'll keep an eye on that. Kentucky, 4.5 million people, overwhelmingly white, 85, 87% white, 4.4% unemployment. A big issue there is Medicaid.
Yes.
Bevin said you got to work harder for Medicaid, made him unpopular.
Yes.
Beshear said, I will not change those. Where's the lesson?
Well, and Steve Beshear, his father, was someone who embraced the Affordable Care Act. He rebranded it. I think they called it Kentucky Connect, so as not to call it Obamacare. But it was quite popular. And so this became an issue for Bevin. He had other issues as well. He clashed with the teachers. He, his personality, frankly, was pretty prickly. So he did go in at a big disadvantage in this race. But it is a Republican state at this point. The president wins by 30 points. And I agree, the president went in there to try and save this guy, but he wouldn't have gone in there if he didn't think he could save this guy. And so we saw the limits of his coattails here, and you saw it particularly in those suburban areas. And that continues a trend that we've seen since 2016 that should be worrisome, not frankly to him in the state of Kentucky. He's going to carry the state of Kentucky, but if you extrapolate to other places around the country, this could be a concern for him.
David, is there a lesson in not just what Beshear talked about, but what he didn't? Given this list of what was in this 5-minute cell of his, Medicaid, schools, all right, not unusual. I'll get away from this divisiveness that we see in Washington. Does not talk impeachment, does not mention the president. What's the lesson in that?
Correct. And if you're a 2020 Democrat running for president, yes, you're trying to court your Democratic base right now in the nomination, but you're probably paying attention to this a bit, where sometimes the conversation is dominated by Trump or impeachment or the news of day headlines. Beshear made it very clear from the get-go in this race, he saw his only path was to localize this, talk about those kitchen table issues, healthcare, education, jobs, and really not try to talk about Donald Trump. It was Bevin who was trying to use Trump to his benefit. It was the Republican incumbent who was trying to sort of bask in the embrace of the president here in hopes of getting over the hurdle. And again, there are only 10,000, 11,000 votes apart. We don't know how this will end up finally. But I do think, Chris, you raise a point. I think there are going to be a lot of Democrats that do extrapolate, hey, what kind of Democrat do we need to win in, again, not Kentucky, that's not a battleground state next year, but in some of these areas where Democrats have made inroads, you can see Democrats asking, what kind of Democrat? What does Beshear teach us about the kind of Democrat who can make inroads, further inroads in the suburbs, maybe pick up some of those Trump voters, some of those rural areas, make some inroads there? And if Beshear's the model, that plays out in that sort of Warren versus Biden kind of ideological.
Well, let's talk about how, though, David. One quick beat before we go to break. One, they're putting a lot of money on impeachment. I know Pelosi was slow. We all knew why. But now they're on the precipice. The country is divided on it at best. And it's not even a real split, right? Because the party numbers are so different. It's all the Democrats, right? You get like 70-something. And like a third to 25% of Republicans think even the inquiry is worth it. This guy doesn't mention impeachment. He is nothing like any of the people on the stage for the Democratic nominees. So is this a warning or is this a good signal?
Well, first of all, you're right. He didn't talk about impeachment. The Republicans did, and their whole campaign down the stretch was to try and attach him to the impeachment in Washington. If he wins tonight, that will have failed as a strategy.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So that's a better point than mine. So let's flesh that out.
Right. I just want to linger on that last point you made.
He didn't talk about impeachment. Fine, but you think there may be an equal opposite at play there, that they talked it up a lot and maybe people didn't want to hear it in that context either.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if Beshear wins, he will have won by localizing it, and they will have failed to have the nationalizing of the race will have failed to save him, including using impeachment to try and mobilize their voters. But look, generally, this, as David was saying, there is a big debate going on within the Democratic Party as to whether you just pump up your base and you can win that way, or whether you need to appeal more broadly, as Beshear did in Kentucky, going into rural counties, appealing in suburban areas. And this is going to play out over the next couple of months.
And let's take a break right now. Fellas, please. Axe, stay here. David, if you can, stick around. As we get some more information, we'll understand this, because you always have to put it in the context of those state-by-state polls we just got. You know, a lot of Democrats' eyes popped open when they saw how strong this president is in states that matter. Kentucky shouldn't be in play, but there may be lessons there. So we'll go through it. We also have a former DNC chair who can add value on why these races tonight, they're big races, really possibly historic races, in his own home state of Virginia. He's also the former governor of Virginia. We've got Senator Tim Kaine is with us tonight to talk politics on a big night. Stay with us. All right, we're following this Kentucky race mostly because the president went down there to campaign for the incumbent, Matt Bevin, not wildly popular, did win by 10 points. The president won by 30 in Kentucky. But now Andy Beshear, who's the sitting attorney general, seems to be very close to sealing the deal. The margin, as you see there, well, they have 6,200 votes ahead right there. That's closer than I had been told. Last number I heard was like 11,000, so the lead's been cut in half. But we are told the last county was just counted. So we're going to have to see when they're ready to say, okay, all votes are in, and we'll look at that level. May well happen on our watch. We'll keep you going. No rush. We're going to talk about what the implications are. If it does go that way, what does it mean? What does it not mean? Another big night in Virginia. All 140 seats in the state Senate and House of Delegates are up. Imagine that. Your entire state government is up. Democrats are trying to pull off a big feat, something they haven't done in a quarter century. Take control from the GOP in all three houses. Why is that so big? If for no other reason, you get to draw the districts. All you hear about gerrymandering and all that stuff, that's why. It happens at the state legislative level. Let's bring in one of Virginia's best-known Democrats, Senator Tim Kaine. Do I have it right, Senator, in that jean jacket? Do I have it right that districting and drawing matters, and why?
It absolutely does. And I'm in a barn out in Prince William County, which is like the battleground of the battleground, and this legislative election sets the stage for redistricting in 2021, where we will have a Democratic governor and 2 Democratic houses. And we won tonight. It looks like we're going to pick up both houses. We won on the maps that the Republicans drew back in 2011. On their maps, we did something that we haven't done for a quarter century.
Why?
With great energy and enthusiasm, picked up both houses.
Why did you do it?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason we won is Democrats in Virginia, we run as the practical problem-solving progressives, while the Republicans run as the ideologues. And what Virginians see is they see a state, they like the way Democrats run things. We know how to govern, and when they see it, and when they see these young dynamic candidates we have, we've basically, in the last 15 years, gone from having nothing to, if we do pick up both houses, and it looks like we will, we'll have everything. Every statewide, both senators, electoral votes in the last 3 presidentials. The last elements we needed were majorities in the 2 legislative houses, and tonight we're going to get them.
Interesting how the fates of politics can change. Northam looked like he was done, the governor there in Virginia. He decided to hold on. He didn't buckle to pressure. Now he's going to have both sets of state government at his behest, and he's going to be able to do things that may have not been done in a generation, certainly not by Democrats. Kentucky.
That's very true.
So your friends say to you, oh, don't be so happy about Kentucky. Bevin wasn't popular. The president went down there to try to help him. The other Republicans killed it in that state. The president's fine. This means nothing about him. Your take?
Well, look, Virginia borders Kentucky. My wife is from Big Stone Gap, Virginia, which is just a few miles from the Kentucky border. Any Republican that tries to downplay Andy Beshear's win, and it looks like he will win, they are whistling past the graveyard. Kentucky is one of the most Republican states in the country. President Trump put it all in by going down there last night to try to get Kentucky to do what they always do, which is go red. The state of the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who is up for election next year in Kentucky. I think the Virginia result tonight and the Kentucky result are both very, very strong signs of hope to people around this country that going into 2020, we can restore our country to the kinds of progressive values that we need to be known for.
So the elections in Virginia, hyper-localized. In Kentucky, Beshear's strategy was doesn't talk impeachment, doesn't talk about the president, talks about Medicaid accessibility because Bevin made a misstep on that and wanted to condition it more. That was obviously a source of tension in a state that's as reliant on it as they are. So what is the lesson for you Democrats? You don't have any Andy Beshear on the stage fighting for this nomination. Is that don't talk impeachment, stay away from the president, offer something to people at home?
No. How about this? How about if you want to provide health care solutions for your citizens, which Democrats do? Democrats expanded Medicaid in Virginia a year and a half ago, and Governor Beshear and now Attorney General Beshear are running on the same thing. If you want to expand health care solutions, run on that against a president who again and again and again, even in court right now, is trying to take health insurance away from tens of millions of Americans. I think that is a great link between Kentucky and Virginia. Republicans try to take health care away from their own people, while Democrats fight to provide health care even for the voters in the other party. That's something you can run on all over this country.
Senator Tim Kaine, appreciate your insight on an important night. Thank you very much.
Glad to be with you. Thanks.
All right. Got to keep covering this election. As I said, we are told the last county was counted in Kentucky. Where does that leave us? The number we just saw on the screen was half of what we've been told a few minutes before. We'll get the latest calculation, the latest expectation. We have Axe, we have Dana Bash. That's enough. When we come back, we'll talk about what this means and what it doesn't. Next. Breaking news out of Kentucky, the GOP governor, Matt Bevin, trailing in his reelection bid, but just barely. We have Dana Bash. She's been talking to Republican sources on the ground there. Dana, great to have you. We've heard the last county was counted. We're waiting to see what that means. We've seen ranges in the difference from 11,000 to 6,000. So we don't know the fate. Bevin is down currently. What's the spin?
Well, the Republicans who I'm talking to in Kentucky and nationally are definitely not hopeful. And already leading into today's election, we heard the expectations being pinned, if he did lose, on Governor Bevin's personality, on the fact that he is so unpopular, probably the most unpopular governor in the country, even and especially among his fellow Republicans in Kentucky. I just was texting with a veteran Republican strategist in Kentucky who said the following: well, we found out that being an a-hole is slightly worse than being a liberal. About Bevin, and pointing out, as many other Republican sources have to me tonight, that other Republicans in Kentucky, all of the other Republicans there, have done very, very well, and that Bevin is an aberration. Having said that, Chris, just before coming on with you, I got a text from a different Republican strategist who was involved broadly in party fundraising and planning for this, who said, very candidly, this is a blow, because Republicans were all in on this, from the RNC to the RGA, the Republican Governors Association, to the president, to the vice president. And despite the fact that the governor is a very flawed candidate, that is the reality that they're going to have to face.
Well, he won by 10 points. Bevin, the last time.
Yeah.
The task for Republicans is to say that the Republicans who won are more like this president than Bevin. But Bevin connected himself to the president more than any of the other candidates, more overtly anyway. So it's a little bit of a tough sell. But fact is that the president won by 30 and is very popular in Kentucky. So we'll see. Dana, very useful information. Thank you very much, as always. All right, let's bring back in the Davids, Axelrod and Chalian. So, Ax, we were talking about what the lessons are. You know, I mean, that's why this matters. Sure, incrementally it matters on the micro.
Auguring.
Kentucky.
Yes.
Right. And where does it take you? What I was just saying to Dana, you know, was it that Bevin was too much like Trump, or was it that he wasn't, you know, seen as Trumpy as the other ones?
Well, I don't think it was that. I don't think he was seen as Trumpian. You know, he may have been Trumpian to a fault in the minds of some voters. He was a very disagreeable guy, and he took off on some very unpopular issues there. But you know, as you point out, Trump won the state by 30 points. He parachuted in on the last night. I think he did so with the expectation that he could pull out a victory. for Bevin, and there were weaknesses that are not just limited to Kentucky that we've seen now for election after election. What we're seeing in Virginia, you look at the suburbs around Richmond, Virginia, the suburbs around Washington, D.C., and Republicans are getting pummeled in those areas. So this is formerly Republican strongholds that are no longer in the Republican column. That is a Trump legacy.
College educated usually speaks to suburb. One of the reasons people thought Bevin may be okay in Kentucky is that you only have 23% college educated in a state that's 87% white. So that was at play there. So Axe was trying to help me understand something, David, in the break. The role of impeachment and the debate over whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing for the Democrats. We keep hearing Tim Kaine, what we saw in Beshear, keep it local, talking health care here, talking jobs, talking local concerns, not talking impeachment. Nobody's asking us about that. And yet it is the dominant narrative in Washington, D.C. How do you reconcile?
Well, I mean, I think you are hitting on, Chris, exactly why Nancy Pelosi was as reluctant as she was to move towards impeachment because of concern that by doing this in a partisan fashion, as the vote on the inquiry indicated this is, in this partisan polarized era of American politics, if you're not, for the Democrats, if you're not bringing over Republicans, if you're not bringing overwhelmingly independents to your cause, what ends up happening is this gets just completely put in its partisan corners. And by the way, that could be beneficial to the president because it gives him that partisan base of support to just stand his footing on while he fights this even to a draw. That I think was the concern here, that there would be potentially seen by voters as Democrats just trying to undo the election. Now, the facts of the impeachment are what they are, and it seems poised that each day the Democrats seem closer and closer to moving ahead with impeachment. But, Chris, I haven't seen anything yet. Now, maybe tonight's Kentucky results will be a data point that the Senate Republican Conference all of a sudden weighs in a different way here. But to this date, I haven't seen anything that shows me 20 Republican senators are about to bail on the president and join Democrats in trying to remove the president.
Right, and Beshear didn't even talk about it, Axe.
No, but let's pick up something else that Tim Kaine said that is important. Democrats won in 2018 by raising health care and the attempt by the president to gut the Affordable Care Act, take protections away for people with pre-existing conditions. That was the basis on which they did very well. It wasn't on the basis of universal coverage, Medicare for all, ending private insurance. Ending private insurance. And, you know, in those, I mean, a big discussion, a big debate within the Democratic Party is, are you going to run on those grounds that were so fertile for you in 2018 that helped Andy Beshear in Kentucky tonight, or are you going to forge this other trail on the theory that you can pump up your base and that will be enough? I think it's a very dangerous path to take, but that's a debate that Democrats are going to have. Governors
have it a little easier on the health care. I mean, they have to ask for waivers and money from the Fed, but the money they control is Medicaid. So in a state especially that's vulnerable with it, like Kentucky, there's a little bit more leverage for a governor.
But this really was, for both Beshears, this was a signature issue. As I said earlier, Steve Beshear was a national leader.
Right.
And he took uninsurance down in his state from like 21% to about 8 or 7%.
By embracing the expansion.
By embracing it, and that was popular.
Right.
And so, you know, being dogmatic on this issue for Republicans didn't work. It could be that Democrats, by being dogmatic on the issue, could take Republicans off the hook.
The Davids always give us deep analysis, and I thank them both, and Dana Bash. Look, I keep bringing it up on the show. We cover impeachment here a lot, and we have to. It's about literally an existential cause in our democratic republic. But politically, it's got some big questions hanging around it. How does the head of the Democratic Party take those questions? How does he see tonight Tom Perez, the leader of the Democratic Party, on a big night? What does it mean? Next.